The hospital tent was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the soft cries of children and the muffled footsteps of nurses moving quickly between beds. The air smelled of medicine and dust, and every corner carried a quiet weight of sorrow. Dozens of children sat close together, some with bandages covering their arms, others staring blankly at the floor, their small faces marked by fear and loss. When Donald Trump stepped inside with the humanitarian convoy, the mood shifted. He had expected cameras, speeches, and formalities, but instead he was met with the raw reality of war. The sight of so many innocent lives disrupted, so many dreams shattered, silenced him in a way few things ever had. For a moment, the loud world he came from, politics, arguments, the noise of power, seemed far away and unimportant. Then his eyes fell on a little boy sitting alone in the corner, clutching a broken toy car in his hands. The boy's fingers traced the chipped edges as if it were the only piece of his world that hadn't been stolen. Trump paused, watching the quiet determination in the child's eyes. It wasn't the look of weakness, it was the look of someone holding on, desperately, to a fragment of hope. Something stirred within him, something deeper than politics or duty. He realized that this was not about nations or leaders. It was about children, about humanity, about the simple wish to feel safe again. And in that instant, he felt the weight of responsibility in a new way. Trump slowly approached the boy, his steps careful, almost hesitant, as if he didn't want to break the fragile silence of the tent. He crouched down so that his eyes were level with the child's, lowering himself to the boy's world. For a moment, neither spoke. The boy's grip on the broken toy tightened, his small fingers trembling slightly. Gently, Trump asked, "What do you want most?" His voice was softer than anyone in the tent had ever heard from him. He expected the boy to ask for food, for warmth, for a new toy. But the child looked up, his eyes glassy with tears that had not yet fallen, and whispered, "Peace, so my mom can come back home." The words hung in the air like a heavy truth no one could escape. They were simple, yet they carried the weight of every wound, every empty chair at a dinner table, every tear shed in the darkness of war. Trump felt his chest tighten. For years he had been surrounded by politics, strategies, and deals, but none of it compared to the honesty of that one fragile wish. In that instant, the boy was no longer just a child in a refugee camp. He was the voice of thousands, perhaps millions, who had lost everything yet still dreamed of a life where love replaced fear. Trump didn't reply right away, he couldn't. Instead, he placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, realizing he had just been given a truth he could never ignore. Trump stood up slowly, his hand still resting gently on the boy's shoulder, and glanced around the tent. The faces of the children, the weary expressions of the mothers, the quiet exhaustion of the nurses, all of it sank into him. For the first time in a long time, he felt that the titles, the power, and the politics meant nothing here. What mattered was survival, dignity, and hope. Instead of returning to the convoy outside, where cameras and reporters waited, he stayed. He rolled up his sleeves and joined the volunteers in serving food. He bent down to hand bowls of soup to the children, offering a smile where he could, listening carefully when someone shared a fragment of their story. Every voice seemed to pierce deeper into his heart, the farmer who lost his land, the grandmother who carried her grandchild through the freezing night, the mother who hadn't heard from her husband in months. His aides whispered nervously, reminding him of schedules and appearances. But he waved them off. For once, he wasn't thinking about strategy. He was thinking about humanity. As night fell, he made quiet calls, not to strengthen his own position, but to arrange for medical supplies, blankets, and safe passage for more families trapped in dangerous zones. The people in the camp noticed. They saw not a politician making promises, but a man willing to act. And for the first time in many weary months, a spark of trust flickered in their eyes. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the camp grew quieter. Families huddled together, children curled under thin blankets, their faces lit only by the glow of lanterns. Trump walked back into the tent where the boy still sat, his broken toy car resting in his lap. This time, Trump wasn't empty-handed. He knelt down once more, pulling out a small box. Inside was a brand new toy car, shiny and whole, its wheels ready to race across the floor. He placed it gently into the boy's hands. The child's eyes widened, but before he could speak, Trump said softly, "This is for you. But more important than the toy is the promise, I will make sure your voice is heard." The boy clutched the new car tightly, but his gaze shifted to Trump, searching for something deeper than gifts. And in that moment, he smiled, a small, fragile smile that spread quickly to the faces around him. Mothers began to weep, children laughed for the first time in weeks, and the entire tent seemed lighter, as if hope had been allowed to breathe again. Trump looked around at the gathering, realizing that compassion could do what speeches never could. In that small act of kindness, the children saw more than generosity, they saw someone who listened, someone who cared. And for the weary families, that smile from a child was a reminder that even in the darkest nights, light could return. The convoy was preparing to leave at dawn, engines rumbling softly in the cold morning air. Trump stood at the edge of the camp, watching as families lined up for food and children played with scraps of cloth and sticks. He glanced back at the boy, now racing his new toy car across the dirt floor, laughter bubbling out of him like music that carried through the camp. One of Trump's aides stepped forward with papers and schedules, but Trump didn't look at them. Instead, he whispered almost to himself, "This war isn't about borders, it's about children's dreams." His words weren't scripted, not meant for cameras or speeches, they came from a place deep inside, stirred by the voices he had heard and the faces he could not forget. The message began to spread. First through the volunteers who had seen him serve and listen, then through the families who carried the story of his compassion beyond the camp. Soon, it reached across the world, a reminder that real leadership is not about power, but about humanity. As the convoy pulled away, Trump looked out of the window one last time. He saw the boy holding the toy car high, waving with a wide smile, his eyes shining with hope. It was a simple gesture, but to Trump, it felt like a promise that kindness could heal wounds that weapons never could. And in that moment, he understood, peace begins not in politics, but in the hearts of those who dare to care.